Good morning. This is Mayor Pro Tem Monica Peters, Chair of the Prosperity, Livability, and Safety Committee, calling to order the Thursday, February 5th meeting. Committee members are Dr. Patrick Harmon, Councilmember Tyrone Johnson, and Councilmember Vicki McKeever, and we're all present today. We've got a little bit of change of the presentation of items. We're going to start with item 2026-26, and this is a status update on major strategic projects. And our Budget and Performance Director, Stephen Howlerick, is presenting. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee. Stephen Haverlick, Budget and Performance Director in the Budget and Evaluation Department. This presentation is going to be on select, what we call major strategic projects. And so kind of what we're going to talk about here, a little bit of background and progress at a kind of overall level. We're going to review the 2019 bond projects and then some other major projects specifically. So background and progress. We have a long list of what we consider major strategic projects and capital projects. These have been identified as part of the Council's strategic plan. They are assigned to the major goal areas. When we talk about progress, there are 44 total strategic and capital projects. 88% are currently on schedule. Strategic versus capital, what that means is a good number of them are capital projects, but not all of them are capital projects. An example is employee pay and development. That is a major kind of strategic area, and while it's part of the strategic plan, it's also listed in this area due to its kind of stature and importance. Our projects are updated quarterly. They follow the same update calendar as our strategic plan updates, and updates are available on the strategic plan public dashboard. And just a reminder of how one can access that dashboard. This is the landing page for the city website. If you scroll to the bottom and go to our strategic plan dashboard, the dashboard will pull up eventually. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, we have a landing page for what's our strategic projects dashboard. And if you go to that, you kind of come to a summary landing page of all the different projects. If you click into a particular project, you'll get your latest update, a map of its location, any type of progress or disruption or anything going on with the project. So just want to remind everyone, we're not going to talk about all 44 of these projects, but this is where one could look at updates for anything that is on this list. And pull back up to this. Noting on the 88% on schedule, part of one of the status updates a project manager can give on a project is disruption. And we like disruption because it happens in all of our projects. And so example of disruption could be if we're waiting on an outside utility to complete some work. We don't have always control over the timeline of that. And so you want to let folks know, hey, project's moving along, but we're waiting on this other entity to do this. And so our practice is if there's disruption, we wait for one more update. And then once we're past that, we consider a project back on track. It may have a new timeline, new estimated completion date, but that's just kind of how we want to notify the public on where things are with projects that may have that type of thing that could bottleneck it or back it up than what was originally planned. Moving on to the 2019 bond projects, just a little reminder of history. In November of 2019, voters approved $50 million in general obligation bonds. These were in 3 areas: housing, parks and recreation, and streets and sidewalks. You can see the amounts for each area that were on the what voters approved, and you can see the specific projects. There were 6 projects for this $50 million. There are 3 completed projects: the Legacy Ridge redevelopment, City Lake Park, and the Washington Street realignment. Since those are completed, we're not going to talk about them today, but I did want to note the progress of those projects. The other active 2019 bond projects in the Parks and Recreation area, there's the Center for Active Adults. This has a total budget of $12.5 million. $12 million of that is from that voter referendum. The current status is we're in construction and we are on track. Construction is on schedule. I did reach out to Mr. Tillery earlier this week. Winter weather is always something that can affect or cause disruption, if you will, with a project. They're still assessing. He doesn't think it's going to affect this anticipated November 2026 completion date. They are still assessing that. More winter weather could also be a factor as we get further along with that project, but it is progressing as expected currently. In the streets and sidewalk area, the Burton Avenue reconstruction, total budget about $6.8 million. Currently in the construction status, it is on track. Water sewer construction is ongoing, and grading for the road widening has started, and the current estimated completion date is winter of 2026. This is one of those projects that I mentioned, that example of an outside utility that did cause some disruption on that, but we are now back to moving this project to an on-track status. Additionally, in streets and sidewalks, the Triangle Lake Road reconstruction, total budget $12 million. We are currently in design and are on track. Right-of-way acquisition is planned to begin this month. There's a numerous amount of properties that are involved in that right-of-way acquisition, and so that is part of the reason why you see estimated construction in spring of 2027. Current estimated completion is spring of 2028, and we have identified that there is a need for additional funding, totaling a little over $11 million in this project. Your next present agenda item is from Davenport, and I think you may see that $11 million number again in that presentation. That concludes the 2019 bond project update. We do want to talk about some other major projects. First, 300 Oak. Current budget, $9 million. This is a combination of ARPA-enabled funds and also a federal grant. It is currently in design and on track. The current timeline has a design-build selection this coming spring and the phase one priorities, which include a roof replacement and some building envelope improvements to start in the fall. Estimated completion summer 2027, and staff has identified about $13 million in additional need above the $9 million budget. And again, you may see that number in the next agenda item when Davenport presents. Next, we're going to talk about the commercial shared use kitchen. This is located at 1661 Westchester. $4.7 million is the current budget. That includes annual CIP funds, ARPA-enabled funds, and a federal grant. It's currently in design and on track. They're currently cleaning up the facility, finalizing plans with the architect, and an RFQ for an operator for the facility is currently kind of in review process with staff. Estimated completion is winter 2026. You see that TBD. We have not yet determined what an additional need for funding would be. The architect was working with the previous site. Now that we have the new site, they're kind of finalizing those plans. And once we have those estimates, we'll be able to review them and put some more concrete numbers to them. Another project, the BUILD grant. For reference, BUILD stands for Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development. Aware that this committee received a thorough update on this, I believe, at their last meeting. Total budget, a little over $28.4 million. We are in the pre-construction phase. We are on track. Right-of-way acquisition planned for this spring. Construction in late summer of 2027. Estimated completion December 2028. You see again that TBD on the need for additional funding. We received a very high-level estimate from the design firm on Monday. So we were able to look through that a little bit. The delay of this presentation let us give a little bit more into that. But we're looking at about potentially $10 million. Again, we're still early in design, so that is a rough, ballpark estimate. But another project where to finish to completion may require additional city funds. And the last project we want to focus in this presentation is the new Electric Operations Center. This is going to be located at 205 Model Farm Road. The current budget is $23.6 million. We are in pre-construction. The project is on track. The existing building is planned to be demolished in June, and then site prep and grading can begin. An estimated completion date, December of 2027. So that concludes kind of the update in the presentation. I will just reference that dashboard again. The updates are pretty high level, but then if you have further questions or have a specific question about a project, please reach out to budget staff, the manager's office, the departments that are managing the projects, and they can provide any of those more specific details that you may have on any of the projects on that dashboard. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, all right. Dr.
Can you get just more details about the extra costs for the Triangle Lake Road? While that was 11 million more than expected, I guess, well, all three of them, I guess, and the 300 Oak as well, and then the build grant. Are some of the reasons for the cost being higher than expected?
I can speak at a high level to some of them. Triangle Lake specifically, that cost estimate probably original cost estimate was out 2018 for a 2019 bond. Infrastructure improvements cost a lot more, and so a lot of that is just timing with what we've seen pre-pandemic and now into post-pandemic.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was for information only, so no vote is needed. Okay, now we'll go on to item 2026-27, capital financing update with Davenport and Company. And Bobby Fitzjohn, our Financial Services Director, will provide us this information.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee. This is earlier than we usually talk about finance, so I hope everybody has coffee and they're ready. We wanted to bring you all an update on our debt model that you all last saw on March of 2024. So we do update this periodically, especially as we're about to bring new debt to council to approve. We want you all to have this information as you head into your planning retreat as well as budget season. So you just saw Steve highlight some additional expenses that are coming from some of these projects. And many of those we will see again outlined in this presentation. One of the key things we want to mention is that further along in the presentation, we talk about the value of a penny, which you all are used to hearing about during budget season. The number you're going to see reflects the current assessed value. We know that we're going through a revaluation process in Guilford County and in Davidson County, and so that number will change, and based on media reports, it should get higher, right, the value of a penny, but at this point, we don't have updated estimates to really refine that number. That'll come later in the budget cycle. So I do want to introduce Mitch Bergoglio from Davenport and Company, and will be available for any questions after his presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you all for having me this morning. So as Bobby said, we're going to kind of bring this current since the last presentation. And along the way, I'll give you kind of a comparison to your last plan that you all saw back in 2024. Spoiler is everything is kind of still on track, just deferred for a year and a half or so from what we had looked at previously. As we go through this, we're going to start out and give you just kind of a brief update, reminder on where you stand from a credit rating perspective, which is really important when we're talking about going to the capital markets to borrow money. That's going to be the biggest driver of your interest rate and the interest cost of your financing. We're going to take a look at your existing tax-supported debt. Where do you stand today? And then we'll look at funding the projects and how that changes your tax-supported debt profile following the funding of all of these projects. If you're a glutton for punishment and like numbers, there is a very detailed summary of all of your outstanding debt in the appendix, but we're really just going to cover the first 10 or so pages here today. So big picture credit rating, and I know y'all are probably see this regularly, but in the municipal world, credit ratings are how investors evaluate whether they want to purchase municipal debt. Think about it as when we go to buy a home or buy a car, we get an auto loan or a mortgage, banks pull our credit score for us individually. Credit rating is essentially the same thing for a municipality like yourselves. Highest that you can be from the national credit rating agencies is a AAA, and you all are a AAA from Standard & Poor's. They are one of the 3 or 4 major national rating agencies. You also have ratings from Moody's Investor Service. You're a AA1. That is the second highest you can be. And from Fitch Ratings, you're a AA+, which is also the second highest you can be. So you all are in very good shape to access the capital markets at a low cost of funds. We can't control where the market interest rates are at any point in time, but you all have set yourself up to take advantage of the best rates you can in any given market, given the credit ratings you all have. And, you've improved those over the years. Going back to the early 2000s, you were in that low AA range, and you've moved up over the years to where you stand now at one of the 2 highest rating levels you can be. We will look at some ratios on your debt profile here in a moment. And for perspective, we'll show you how you stack up to other rated cities and towns, both nationally and North Carolina on those. Those cities and towns that we'll compare you to are kind of summarized on the right-hand side of the page here, both nationally up top and North Carolina down below. And I think just for perspective on your credit rating, if you look at the top chart nationally, you all are in the top 30% nationally related to your credit rating. There's 70% of the folks who have ratings are rated lower than you are. So that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective on the position you're in to access the markets. And feel free to stop me along the way if you have questions. But so going to transition here into your existing debt profile, and this is the tax-supported debt profile. So nothing to do with the water and sewer utility revenue bonds or other outstanding debt you all have. This is just governmental, think of it as like general fund type debt that we're looking at. As of June 30, 2025, about $105 million of total debt outstanding. And we've broken that down into a few different categories. And the ones we're really going to focus on today are those top 2. The General Debt Service Fund, which includes the voted general obligation bonds, as well as the limited obligation bonds, which are essentially a mortgage type financing. Those 2 categories total about $100 million. Those are paid from your debt service fund, and that is the fund that you all have established over the years, have been funding to help carry the cost of all of the infrastructure projects you have done over the years. There's about $5 million that is paid from other funds. Those are more like vehicles and equipment type financings, operating lease type financings. So important to the process, but those are more short-term obligations, not really your long-term debt that we're focused on here today. On that $105 million, I like the chart on the right-hand side of the page here. On the $105 million, you do pay interest on top of that, about $25 million. So the total payback is $130 million. And your final payment on your existing debt outstanding is in 2042. I will kind of point out here that your debt service, your annual payments, so in that total column, it is declining every year, right? You're at $15 million in this current budget year, but it's going to go down every year from there. And that's really where we're going to look to take advantage as we issue new obligations to fund these new projects. We're going to take advantage of that reduction in the payment to eliminate or limit the impact of bringing these new projects online. Far right is the 10-year payout ratio. This is one of the 3 key ratios that we look at when evaluating your debt profile. It is a ratio you have a policy, financial policy on. And what this says is how much of that $105 million are you paying back in the first 10 years? How much do you retire in the first 10 years? And in your case, it's 74%, which is a very rapid payout ratio. It means you're issuing debt, you're paying it back, paying it down in a responsible fashion. You're not issuing debt and leaving it outstanding for a really long time, just ticking away at the interest. You are retiring the debt rapidly, which again is going to be helpful as you look to fund new projects. Page 7 outlines your the 3 debt policies that I just alluded to. That 10-year payout ratio is on the right. You have a minimum 10-year payout ratio policy of 60%. You're well above that at 74% right now. So in good shape there. In the middle of the page is debt to assessed value. So your total tax supported debt outstanding, $105 million, compared to your tax base. We are still using the 26 tax base, as Bobby alluded to, of $14 billion. And we're assuming in this analysis kind of natural growth of 1.5%. Does not factor in that reval growth. So this is just kind of the natural growth in the city's tax base that you would capture. And you're sitting at about 0.75% debt outstanding as a percentage of your assessed value. Have a policy limit of 2.5%, so a maximum of 2.5%, well below that policy limit. And that's not because it's a really high policy, it's a good policy. The typical policy range is 2 to 3%. So you're right in that range, it's a good policy. You're just in very good shape compared to that. And you can see down below, I know it gets a little small, but we do have one of these peer comparatives with the city as the gold bar, the national medians for AAA, AA, and single A rated cities and towns are the light green, and then the dark green bars are the North Carolina AAA, AA, and there's one single A city down below, so you don't really see anything there. And what you see there is, your gold bar, you're kind of right in line with the North Carolina medians and in line or below those national medians for the most part. Just kind of reinforcing that you're in good shape on this measure of your debt load, right? You're within your policy, compare nicely to these other rated cities and towns. Same thing, lastly, on debt service to expenditures on the right. This is a measure of your annual payment, so principal plus interest that you pay annually, so $15 million in 2026, divided by your total governmental budget, excluding capital expenditures. You're sitting at under 10%. You have a policy not to exceed 15%. So again, in very good shape, and you can see that peer comparative kind of right in line with all of those medians. So taken as a whole, within your policies, compared to your rated peers, we would say you have debt capacity under these ratios. It is reasonable for you all to be considering funding these major or some of these major projects with financings, with debt issuance. You have capacity within these metrics to do so if you choose to. The related concept is affordability, right? Going back to my personal metaphor, I may have a good credit rating and I can go to the banks and they'll say, yeah, I'll pre-qualify you for a mortgage of $300,000, but I may know that, well, I gotta get a new refrigerator, I gotta put a new tires on my car, and I don't have the budget capacity right now to pay for that level of mortgage. I can do $150,000, I can do half of that, right? So that's kind of this concept of debt affordability. And what we do, and you all have established a very nice plan over the years, we're gonna look at the debt that is paid from the general debt service fund, that's all of your long-term debt, roughly $100 million, compared to the revenue sources that you all have set aside and dedicated to fund this debt service fund over the years. That's a 3.4% property tax rate. That is an annual transfer from the general fund of right at $4.7 million. Investment earnings within the debt service fund, those stay within the debt service fund. And then there were certain revenues tied to the stadium financing that go to pay back the debt service on the stadium. Things like the lease revenue, the naming rights, the CVB contribution are all part of that revenue source. And then finally, the incremental revenue that you all have gained within that Catalyst project area, that has been set aside into this debt service fund to help pay back the debt on the stadium as well. So we're going to model all of those revenues up and look at them compared to the debt service, principal plus interest, that's paid out of the debt fund. We're also starting with a balance in the debt service fund. That's a cash balance of right at $12.6 million at the end of fiscal '25. And you all over the years have had a practice to maintain a target of at least 50% of your annual payments within that debt fund, right? Gives you a little bit of cushion should some of these revenues vary. You have at least half of your debt service payments set aside to help cover that. So that all comes together on page 9, and I know these numbers get really small on your computer. I can't zoom in, but at a high level, I'll tell you, column D is the existing payments, total of all your requirements. That's your existing payments on the existing debt. We will add the proposed debt service to it when we do the analysis in a moment. And then in that kind of light brown gold bar, columns E through J are those revenues that I just walked you through. And those all total up into that far column J, and we've projected those out through the years. And then column K, the third to last column, looks at the revenues that are available in J versus the requirements in D. And you can see those first 2 years, and you may not read the numbers, but you can see the color at least, it's red. There's a couple of small uses of that fund balance to cover the next 2 years. And then after that, you were in a surplus mode. Those dollars, those surplus dollars, are what is going to be available to help fund the payments on these new projects, plus the balance in the debt service fund that we're carrying in column L. So this is kind of the baseline for that debt affordability. You have debt capacity, and looking at this, particularly columns K and column L, you have affordability to fund new projects. The question is it enough capacity? Is it enough affordability to fund the projects that we're looking at? And we've summarized this analysis for you on page 11. And I'll kind of walk you through the summary. The details of the analysis are right behind it. Again, if you like numbers and want to dig in, I'm always game, but I'll walk you through the summary to start. The left-hand side outlines the planned financings at this point, or assumed financings at this point. We are funding on lines 1 through 4 the voted GO bonds, right? 2019 GO bonds, these were approved by the voters. There's $24 million left authorized by the voters that have not yet been issued. The $12 million of Parks and Rec, which will go to the Center for Active Adults, that's going to be issued this spring. And then 2 years later is the $12 million for Triangle Lake Road. That is the remaining transportation authorization. That's the $24 million remaining. Underneath that, lines 5 through 8, is what's called 2/3 GO bonds. In North Carolina, by statute, you are allowed to issue these 2/3 bonds, which represent 2/3 of the reduction in your voted GO bonds outstanding. Those are additional GO bonds that you can issue without a referendum, but they have to be authorized. You have to go through an approval process, and the LGC has to approve them. You all have 2/3 capacity this spring of $5.5 million. And then in 2028, we're projecting there's another $5.5 million of capacity for a total of just over $11 million. That is that gap needed to fund the Triangle Lake Road project. So this is the mechanism that we're using to fund those remaining costs on the Triangle Lake Road project in fiscal 26 and 28. Then we have being funded 3 consecutive fiscal years, 27, 28, and 29, the 300 Oak Street project, downtown parking project, and the new city hall. Those are being done with those limited obligation bonds. Think of that as a mortgage on those facilities that are being issued, financed. In total, that's $148 million of new projects being funded through this financing process. When we run that through the debt capacity and the debt affordability, you can see the results on the right-hand side. The debt capacity ratios all stay within your policy limits. So no issues there. You have the capacity to fund this level of projects. Down below that is the debt affordability. And what I will tell you is you have the debt affordability to fund the GO bonds. That was put in place, part of that 3.4 pennies, when those bonds were voted, put in place, those are still covered. When we go through the full $150 million, there is additional revenue required to fund these payments. You could wait until fiscal year 2029, and you would need to come up with the equivalent of today's penny value of about 7 pennies, need another roughly half a penny the next year, total of about 8 pennies if you waited. If you were to take care of the needs this coming budget year, it is the equivalent of about 4.3 pennies. That would be, you need to come up with new dedicated revenues that will grow in conjunction with the tax base of right at $6.1 million. So today's value of a penny, that's about 4.3 pennies. Depending upon revaluation, you got to come up with $6.1 million plus natural growth annually. For comparison to where we were in the plan previously, we're kind of right on top of it. That 4.35 pennies in 27 was 4.75 pennies in the last analysis, and it was actually in 26, not 27. So a little bit better there. And the Triangle Lake Road project was in 26. That's been pushed into 2028. As have the other major capital projects. Those have all been shifted by about a year and a half, 2 years as well. So, like I alluded to at the beginning, we're really very much in the same place as we were previously. We've just kind of shifted out about a year and a half. I mentioned the Triangle Lake Road project shift. Your GO bonds that were authorized in 2019, they are authorized for an initial 7-year period, and you have the ability to extend that authorization 3 additional years for a total of 10 years. So in order to keep that authorization and issue it in 2028, we will be coming to you all this spring with a request to approve the extension. And if you all approve that extension of the authorization, it will go to the LGC for approval. That is planned to be in conjunction with the issuance of the Parks and Recreation bonds this spring. We have a targeted sale date of those in May 12th. As well as the 2/3 bonds, 2/3 GO bonds, the first $5.5 million for Triangle Lake. Those would sell on May 12th as well with the voted Parks and Rec bonds. So I just wanted to give you that heads up that this spring there'll be a series of actions that will be brought to you all associated with these GO bonds. An extension of the transportation bonds, approval of the authorization and issuance of the first 2/3 bond issue, and approval of the issuance of the Parks and Rec authorization at $12 million. And those, just for perspective, penciled in late March and both April meetings, there would be actions needed to approve those before the bond sale would occur on May 12th. So that's kind of the high-level summary that I wanted to provide. Again, I'm happy to dig into as much detail as you'd like, but hopefully that gives you the perspective you're looking for.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, question. Councilman Johnson here. When you mention about, and I just want to make sure I understand this, extension in regards to Triangle Lake Road, are we talking about extending?
That's for the GO bond authorization. So when you put a GO bond on the referendum and the citizens vote to approve it, it's approved. There is an initial 7-year period that authorization is good for. At the end of 7 years, that authorization from the voter approval expires unless you all take an action and it's approved by the local government commission to extend it for an additional up to 3 years. It's a very normal process with the GO bonds, like alluded to with the cost, right? You've got to settle on an estimated amount up front, but then you've got 7 years to do the project. Things change, right? Inflation, et cetera. Same thing with the timing. You know you want to do this project, it's good for 7 years, but oftentimes you get into engineering, things change, it takes longer, so that's why they give you the 3-year extension. And it's very common for GO authorizations to be extended to accommodate a full 10-year authorization period.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments?
So this debt list, I guess, doesn't include what Stephen was talking about, the build grant is probably going to be $10 million more. That's not listed here. Not sure about the shared use kitchen. That might be more than we have in the bank, I guess. So if you figure those things in, how does that change some of these things?
So I'll say on the shared use kitchen perspective, at this point, we don't have any numbers to indicate that debt would be appropriate for that. If, for some reason, the project costs were to go significantly higher and we still pursued it, that might be a debt issue, but it may not be large enough to where we can't accommodate it with cash, right? We may have additional funding sources. I think with the build grant, we're still so early in that estimate, and our funding mechanisms are a little more limited because, as Mitch said, the limited obligation bonds are like a mortgage, right? So you secure it with the thing you're building, whereas that's not as easily done with a road project because a bank can't repossess a road. So our funding mechanisms are just different for that. So we'll have to consider alternatives when we get a better idea of the total cost of that project. And I don't know, Eric, if you have anything else to add to that.
So what are the alternatives then?
Could be additional bond funding, could be internal loan funding, could be other outside sources, but that would all be speculation at this point until we have a better idea of what the total project cost is.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
now
y'all.
Thank you. So now we'll go to the third item, and that is item 2026-33, Human Relations Commission's 2026 Work Plan. And City Council is requested to consider the Human Relations Commission's proposed 2026 Work Plan. And we have Race McCray, our Human Relations Director. So thank you, Race.
Good morning, Council. Happy to be here. I'm the Human Relations Manager for the city, Race McCray, and I am also the staff liaison to the Human Relations Commission. So I'm going to be providing you just a little overview, reminders about what work the commission does, remind you of some of the previous items that we've done and completed, and then talk to you about 2 new work plan items that the commission has adopted and is asking for council's approval on. So first, the Human Relations Commission is an advisory body to the City Council. It is appointed by 9 members who are residents of High Point. We do a number of things. I've listed a number of our duties there. The things that I want to highlight, because they relate to the work plan items today, are advise council on the establishment of human relations goals, objectives, policies, and standards, and develop plans and analyses for human relations needs, as well as conducting some of our council-approved programs and encouraging our youth to become better employed and trained for employment. Our work plan process, because we are advisors to the City Council, our work plan process is to develop work plan items that fall under those duties and then bring them to Council for approval. We, the commissioners will develop items themselves sometimes, but we also have two subcommittees underneath the commission, an international advisory committee that deals specifically with our residents who have international backgrounds or interests, and then also our social justice committee. And so another way for work plan items to be proposed is that those bodies, which are composed of volunteer members from the community, can suggest items that then get filtered to the commission where they're discussed, refined, and adopted. So ultimately, everything is brought through the commission, no matter where it originates, and they have then kind of discussed it and ultimately are presenting it to you for approval. Some of our recent highlights, these are some items that we previously brought to council and that have since been completed, so I just kind of wanted to check in on where these are. You may remember that we explored the feasibility of High Point becoming a fair housing assistance program. That resulted in the City Council adopting a fair housing ordinance. After that, we have developed greater outreach to our Latinx communities. That resulted in a citywide language access plan that was implemented by city leadership, and we're currently in the implementation process. That is an ongoing policy. So currently, we, for example, have begun translating some of our vital documents, some of, say, our applications for offense. Now they're in our strategic languages of English and Urdu, and they'll soon be available to the public. We've also implemented a interpretation service, a telephonic interpreter, that all city staff have access, so whenever someone comes in with speaking a language other than English, they can call the interpreter service to assist with those customers. Two other items, we also were tasked with promoting collaboration among our boards and commissions. This led to our first information sharing session where we brought all of the commissions and boards members together, as well as council, and we talked about what each board and commission did so that we could all be aware of each other's work. And that was highly successful, and everyone was really excited about it. And then the other one was we'd had a mental health initiative that over the years was refined into finally supporting OK High Point, which is a campaign that is a kind of collaborative campaign from a number of different mental health providers within High Point. And we knew that the item basically became that the commission could help promote this by doing a mailing insert into our bills to talk about this, and that was successful as well. So now I'm going to transition into the actual work plan items that you need to take action on today. So these are our two proposed work plan items for 2026. The first is increase the opportunities for the city to support High Point families. This relates in part to the duty that we have to promote education and training for our youth to become more employed, but also then to advise just generally about where our human relations priorities lie. So potential action items that the commission has discussed would be surveying residents about city services, programs, and events to help inform further outreach plans. We've seen, especially through some of our subcommittees, some confusion about what services the city offers, so kind of learning more about how we can do that and get those words out. And another potential action item would be exploring opportunities, in addition to what we already do, for the city to support student readiness and back-to-school efforts, including further outreach to the schools and the families at those schools themselves, and also education about our program offerings, especially through the human relations work that we do. The second proposed work plan item is explore how the HRC can better support the city's new strategic plan. You've already heard of, I know you've been well involved with the strategic plan, and you've already heard some of the strategic initiatives. The HRC is also really excited about this, and we wanted to think, how can we also kind of integrate some of those same principles, those priorities that council has into our work itself. So potential action items included discuss how to share information about the human relations initiatives that we're doing with some of our local nonprofits, and then also creating a template that the HRC can use themselves for developing future work plan items that strongly align with the strategic plan. Since it's such a new strategic plan, that's not something that we've done in our past items. Even though we're proud of them, we're still saying, how can we better support what the work of council is doing? Those are the two proposed work plan items that we'd like to be considered by the committee today, and I'm free to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? No, go ahead.
I guess just for the public information about the job fair for teens, that's been going on the last couple of years, just to kind of talk a little bit about that and how it's gone. I know it's not specific to here, but it's an opportunity to share that to the public.
Absolutely. So we do a teen job fair every year that kind of comes out of this exact work. That used to be called Opportunity, which is something that we inherited from, actually from Dr. Harmon's work. And that was something that we did the past 2 years. We basically invite a number of students from the high schools to attend a job fair specifically targeted towards jobs that can be summer jobs, jobs that can be even part-time jobs during the school year. So it's not the same as a career workshop, you know, where it's like, hey, here's what you might do for college in 5 or 7 years. It's very much how can you get employment and start building that employment record right now. That also includes outreach for me directly into the communities. I used to work as a job counselor, so I go into the schools and talk to the students about developing resumes, developing some cool interview skills, and thinking about their etiquette on the job. And that's been very successful as that kind of pipeline. The kids come ready to talk already to the employers, and the employers have been very excited to then hire these teens and kind of build that collaboration. It is changing slightly this year. It has a new name. One of the key core principles of my division is that we always work with our community partners as best as possible. In this case, the obvious community partner is Guilford County Schools. They've been involved in the past 2 years, and as well as High Point Schools Partnership. But this year, Guilford County Schools would like to take over more of those duties, which we're of course happy to do. And that means that they're going to be inviting even more schools, including across the entire county, so not just High Point Schools. And we're making it a much larger event. So they're kind of taking the general direction of that. They've renamed it as the Future Forward Job Expo, and that's still happening this year in our stadium in March. And so we're working with the schools because one of the key components of this is that the schools actually identify the students and bus them over directly to participate in this, and we kind of just help with the making sure the employers are there, making sure that our students are prepared, and give all sorts of information. We're also this year bringing in like a bank to talk about financial literacy and do some kind of more thoughts about what you do with your money. It's a very great program, and we're excited to see it expand this year.
It's fantastic. Thanks, Ruth. I'm very excited about the work that you guys do with HRC. Very exciting and awesome.
So I have a question. On one of the slides, it says something about conducting surveys. So tell me, how are you planning on conducting the surveys?
Sure. So the HRC, and these are potential action items. So part of the way this work plan works is that they come up with some, general framework of what this might look like, but we don't want to get out in front of council on this item itself. So there has not been, here's, on April 2nd, we're going to deploy. It's not like that. So it's just a general framework that I can talk about. The idea here was that as we're looking for opportunities to support our families, that we'd be thinking also about kind of inquiring with the families, what is it that they already know about the city and what is it that they don't know about the city? And we are hoping to actually deploy that at a couple different things. For one thing, my division is already out at a bunch of outreach events. You may see us, for example, at the Unity Fest, or you may see us at the Disability Advocacy Center Fiery Festival, things like that. So that's one place where when people are stopping by and learning about the work of the city and what human relations do, we'd also have a survey available for those folks. The other thing is that they've talked about kind of a greater partnership with us and some of High Point schools, specifically with a request that we try to get more city participation at, say, open houses that the schools are doing. And that would be the other place where we'd be specifically looking at, hey, these are the families who are already in our schools, who are in our residence. Can we also say, hey, while you're here, please let us know what you do and don't know about the city. We don't have questions developed at this point, and we don't have further plans beyond those two kind of streams that I identified.
And then another comment. So go back to that last slide. It says something, okay, explore how the HRC can better support the city's new strategic plan. So do you ever contact or talk to other HRCs at other municipalities? Because sometimes, you may not think of an idea, but another municipality has done it, and then it worked really well. So do you?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Something that I didn't include on the earlier sides of completion, because we completed it at an earlier date, so maybe a year ago or a year and a half, I can't quite recall the date. One of our previous work plan items was to kind of learn how to be a better HRC, essentially. I'm not quoting it correctly, but, and part of that work included that each one of the commissioners actually reached out to a separate HRC across the state, learned more about what they were doing already, learned more about what programs are being offered, what their structure is in terms of how do they have their own subcommittees, how often are they meeting, things like that. And we shared some of that work at our last boards and commissions meeting, and it kind of informed that item itself grew out of that work, that we said, hey, we're seeing in other cities, say Greensboro was the model here, that they get together once a year or twice a year, and all the boards and commissions work together in this sense. And so that was an item that actually grew out of that collaboration with the other HRCs. I also know in the past, and this is something that they've talked about, though it has not been proposed in any way formally yet, we have in maybe over a decade ago met as a joint meeting with the Human Relations Commission from Greensboro or the Human Relations Commission from Fort Winston-Salem, just to develop cross-city bonds with our kind of triad area. And I know that there's some interest in doing that kind of thing and promoting that kind of collaboration, especially now.
Okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so let's see. I guess, entertain a motion to accept the 2026 work plan.
Second?
Okay. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, well, then that passes. Thank you so much, Race. I think that sounds great, great work. All right, if there's no other comments or questions, then we'll adjourn the meeting. Okay, everybody be safe and warm. A big shout out to our city staff for your great work on these roads. We've had 2 weeks of unprecedented weather challenges, and y'all have done an amazing job, so thank you so much. All right, this meeting is adjourned.